If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment telling me which part touched your heart the most. Your support means the world and helps bring more stories like this one to life. The crystal glass shattered against the marble floor of Santiago Mendoza's office, sending fragments scattering like frozen tears across the pristine surface. His assistant Roberto stood frozen in the doorway, contracts still clutched against his chest. "Get out," Santiago said, his voice barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he had screamed. Roberto vanished without a word, closing the heavy mahogany door with the careful precision of someone handling explosives. Santiago turned back to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Paseo de la Reforma, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. Up here, in his glass tower, silence was his only companion. His phone buzzed. Another nanny had quit. The fourth one this month. He read the message without expression. "Mr. Mendoza, I regret to inform you that I cannot continue caring for Valentina. She requires specialized attention that I am not qualified to provide. I wish you and your daughter the best." Santiago deleted the message and pulled up his contacts, scrolling to the agency number he had memorized by now. Before he could dial, another notification appeared. This one from Dr. Castellanos, the neurologist who had been treating Valentina since her diagnosis 5 years ago. "Santiago, we need to discuss alternative residential facilities. Valentina's lack of progress concerns me. Perhaps a specialized institution would be more appropriate for her needs." His jaw tightened. Institution. The word felt like poison in his mind. His daughter was not a problem to be filed away in some sterile facility where she would become just another case number. Valentina was 7 years old. She had her mother's eyes, dark and deep like wells, that held secrets only she could see. She had not spoken a single word since the day she was born. Not mama, not papa, not even a cry when she fell and scraped her knees. The specialists called it severe, non-verbal autism. Santiago called it his greatest failure. He had conquered markets, destroyed competitors, built an empire that spanned 3 continents. But he could not reach his own daughter. Every therapist, every specialist, every experimental treatment had failed. Valentina existed in a world he could not enter, separated from him by an invisible wall that no amount of money could demolish. His phone rang. The agency. "Mr. Mendoza, we may have found someone, but I must be transparent with you. She's not a traditional candidate, no formal nanny certifications. However, her references are impeccable, and she has extensive experience with special needs children. Send her tomorrow," Santiago said flatly. "If she lasts a week, I'll consider it a success." "There's one more thing, sir. She has a son, 10 years old. He would need to accompany her during work hours after school. The boy is exceptionally well behaved, and she's indicated this is non-negotiable." Santiago almost refused immediately. His penthouse was not a daycare center, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was exhaustion, perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the universe finally deciding to intervene in ways he could not yet understand. "Fine, tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp." He ended the call and walked to the small table where a framed photograph sat. His wife, Carolina, smiled at him from beyond the grave, frozen forever at 32, before the accident that had stolen her and left him alone with a daughter he could not comfort and a guilt he could not escape. "I'm trying," he whispered to the photograph. "I'm trying, but I don't know how to reach her." The photograph offered no answers. It never did. The next morning arrived wrapped in the grey mist that often blanketed Mexico City in early autumn. Santiago stood in his living room, checking his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. 7:58. He appreciated punctuality almost as much as he despised lateness. At exactly 8 Zu, the elevator doors opened. She stepped out first. Mariana Torres, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that somehow managed to look elegant. She wore simple clothes, clean and pressed, nothing designer, but carried herself with a dignity that expensive clothes could not manufacture. Behind her came the boy, Emiliano. He had his mother's coloring, but there was something different in his eyes. An awareness, an old soul quality that made Santiago pause. The boy looked around the penthouse, not with the awe most children displayed when confronted with obvious wealth, but with careful assessment, as if cataloguing exits and safe spaces. "Mr. Mendoza." Mariana extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Thank you for this opportunity. Don't thank me yet. The last 4 nannies quit within days. My daughter is." He searched for the right word and found none adequate. "Valentina," Mariana said simply. "I reviewed the information the agency provided. Where is she now?" Santiago gestured toward the hallway that led to the east wing. "Her room. She rarely comes out voluntarily. She doesn't respond to verbal commands, doesn't make eye contact, and becomes extremely distressed by unexpected sounds or movements." "May I see her?" Something in her tone made him look at her more carefully. Most nannies approach Valentina's room with the careful dread of someone entering a hospital ward, Mariana asked, as if she were requesting permission to meet an old friend. "This way." As they walked, Emiliano fell into step beside his mother, his hand brushing hers briefly. A silent communication passed between them, and Santiago wondered what unspoken language they shared. Valentina's room was painted in soft blues and greens, colors the specialists had recommended. She sat in her usual spot by the window, arranging small stones in patterns only she understood. She did not look up when they entered. She never did. "Hello, Valentina," Mariana said softly, staying near the doorway. "My name is Mariana. I'm going to be spending time with you. I won't come closer until you're ready for me to." No response. Santiago felt the familiar tightness in his chest. But then something unexpected happened. Emiliano had been silent since arriving, standing slightly behind his mother. Now he moved forward, not toward Valentina, but to the corner of the room where a small shelf held unused toys. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and began arranging items of his own. Small figurines, positioning them with the same methodical precision Valentina used with her stones. For the first time in Santiago's memory, Valentina's hands paused. Her eyes, still not meeting anyone's gaze, shifted almost imperceptibly toward the corner where Emiliano sat. "Mr. Mendoza," Mariana said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss her routine in another room." Santiago nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on his daughter. In 7 years, he had never seen her voluntarily acknowledge another person's presence in her space. In the hallway, he turned to Mariana. "What just happened?" "Emiliano understands her," Mariana said simply. "Understands her." He didn't say a word. Neither did she. But they communicated. Santiago stared at her, searching for any sign of the condescension or false hope he had encountered from countless specialists. He found neither, just calm certainty. "I should tell you," he said, his voice harder than he intended, "that I've heard promises before. Every therapist, every expert, every miracle worker has promised me breakthroughs. My daughter has not spoken a single word in her entire life, not one. So if you're here to sell me hope, save your energy." Mariana met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to sell you anything, Mr. Mendoza. I'm here because my son saw your job listing and told me we needed to apply." "Your son? A 10-year-old? He said there was a girl who needed help, a girl who talks in ways nobody listens to." She paused. "He's never been wrong about these things." Santiago wanted to dismiss this as nonsense, wanted to maintain the cynical armor he had built over years of disappointment, but something in her words, in the scene he had just witnessed, cracked something inside him. What is he? Some kind of child prodigy? A savant? "He's just a boy who sees what others miss." Mariana's expression softened slightly. "You should know that I'm not a traditional nanny. My methods may seem unconventional. I won't force Valentina into compliance or routines she's not ready for. Progress will be slow, perhaps invisible at first." "Progress? You've been here 10 minutes, and you're already talking about progress?" "I'm talking about possibility, Mr. Mendoza. Your daughter is not broken. She's simply speaking a language no one has taken the time to learn. Before Santiago could respond, a sound came from down the hallway. Small footsteps. Running. He turned, and his heart stopped. Valentina stood at the end of the corridor, her small frame trembling, but she was not running away. She was running toward them, toward the room where Emiliano remained. She passed Santiago without a glance, something she had never done. Never once had she voluntarily moved toward another human being. He followed her back to her room and stopped in the doorway, unable to process what he saw. Emiliano sat exactly where he had been, still arranging his figurines, but now Valentina sat beside him, not touching, but closer to another person than Santiago had ever seen her. She picked up one of his figurines and placed it in her stone pattern. Emiliano nodded solemnly and adjusted his arrangement to complement hers. They were building something together, in silence. Santiago felt a hand on his arm. Mariana stood beside him. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "But you should know something, Mr. Mendoza. Miracles require patience, and sometimes they require us to become people we never expected to be." He looked at her, this woman who had walked into his home and upended everything he thought he knew about his daughter. "Who are you, really?" he asked. Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or memory. It vanished before he could identify it. "I'm just a mother trying to do right by my son," she said. "And now, trying to help your daughter find her voice. Isn't that enough for today?" It wasn't enough. Not nearly. But for the first time in years, Santiago Mendoza felt something he had forgotten how to feel. Hope. 3 weeks passed, and the penthouse transformed in ways Santiago barely recognized. Not physically. The marble floors still gleamed, the art still hung in precise arrangements, the windows still framed the city below. But there was sound now, movement, life. Emiliano came every day after school, his backpack stuffed with schoolwork he barely touched. Instead, he sat with Valentina. They built worlds together, from stones and figurines, from paper and string, from the peculiar materials only children find meaningful. And Santiago, who had always viewed his home as a fortress of productivity, found himself pausing at doorways, watching. He watched and felt like a stranger in his own life. "You're staring again," Mariana said, appearing beside him with a cup of coffee she had not been asked to make. She had taken to doing that, small acts that blurred the line between employee and something else entirely. "Observing," he corrected. "I'm observing my investment." "Is that what she is to you? An investment?" The question should have offended him. Instead, it carved something open inside his chest. "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" He turned from the doorway where Valentina and Emiliano sat together, now working on what appeared to be an elaborate map drawn on butcher paper. "I meant that you and your son are here because I'm paying for your time. I'm trying to determine if that payment is yielding results." Mariana took a slow sip of her own coffee, unfazed by his corporate terminology. "And what metrics are you using to measure success? Return on investment, quarterly growth projections?" "You're mocking me." "I'm wondering if you actually know what you're looking for, or if you're so used to measuring everything in numbers that you've forgotten how to see with your heart." Santiago opened his mouth to deliver a cutting response, but his attention was caught by movement in Valentina's room. Emiliano had produced a small notebook and was showing Valentina something. She leaned closer, closer than she had ever voluntarily moved toward anyone, and her fingers traced over whatever was drawn on the page. "What is he showing her?" Santiago asked. "Letters, probably. He's been teaching her to associate symbols with meanings. Not words, exactly, more like a shared code. She can't read. We've tried. Every specialist has tried. Have they tried letting her learn in her own way, on her own terms?" Mariana set down her coffee cup on a nearby console table. "Your daughter isn't incapable, Mr. Mendoza. She's simply been taught by people who couldn't hear her. Emiliano hears her. He's 10 years old. He's not a therapist or a specialist. No, he's something better. He's patient." Santiago bristled at the implication. "I've been patient," 7 years of patience, 7 years of watching my daughter disappear further into herself, while expert after expert failed to reach her. With respect, you've been waiting. That's not the same thing. Excuse me. Mariana turned to face him fully, and for the first time since she arrived, he saw something fierce beneath her careful composure. Patience means being present without expectation. It means sitting in silence without demanding that silence be filled. It means meeting someone where they are, instead of where you think they should be. She paused, her voice softening. When was the last time you sat with Valentina without wanting something from her, without hoping she would speak or respond, or give you some sign that she recognized you as her father? The words struck him like physical blows. Because she was right. Every moment he spent with Valentina was weighted with expectation. Every silence between them felt like failure. I don't know how to just sit, he admitted, surprised by his own honesty. I've built my entire life on action, on results, on making things happen through sheer force of will. And how has that worked with her? He had no answer. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but charged with something he could not name. My wife used to sit with her, he said finally. Carolina. She died when Valentina was 2, before the diagnosis, before we understood. Mariana's expression shifted, the fierceness giving way to something gentler. I'm sorry. I didn't know. The agency didn't tell you? It's usually the first thing they mention. Poor Santiago Mendoza. Billions of pesos and he can't buy back his wife or fix his daughter. They told me you were a widower. They didn't tell me you blamed yourself. I don't blame myself. Then why did you phrase it that way? Can't buy back his wife. Can't fix his daughter. Those aren't the words of a man at peace with circumstances beyond his control. Santiago turned away, walking toward the window that had become his refuge. The city sprawled below, indifferent to his turmoil. What do you want from me? A confession? Therapy? I hired you to help my daughter, not to psychoanalyze me. I want you to understand that Valentina feels everything you feel, every ounce of guilt, every wave of frustration, every moment of despair. Children like her don't miss social cues because they're oblivious. They miss them because they're overwhelmed. They feel too much, not too little. He spun around. You're saying she knows. She understands. I'm saying she's drowning in emotions she has no way to process or express. And when you stand in her doorway watching her like a scientist studying a specimen, she feels that too. The accusation hit its mark. Santiago gripped the window frame, knuckles whitening. Then what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to feel? Feel whatever you feel, but don't make her carry it. Mariana stepped closer, her voice dropping. You asked me once who I really am. You want to know? I'm someone who lost everything because I couldn't find the right words to save someone I loved. I know what it's like to stand outside a wall you can't break through, screaming into silence. Something raw passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Two people who understood devastation in ways they could not articulate. What happened? He asked quietly. She shook her head. That's not a story for today. But someday, if you earn it. He almost smiled at her audacity. Almost. Earn it? I'm paying your salary. You're paying for my time. My trust costs considerably more. Before he could respond, a sound cut through the penthouse. Small, soft, barely more than a breath, but unmistakable. Santiago froze. The sound had come from Valentina's room. He was moving before conscious thought caught up, his feet carrying him down the hallway faster than dignity would normally allow. He stopped in the doorway, heart hammering. Valentina sat facing Emiliano, her small hands pressed against the notebook between them. Her lips were moving, forming shapes, trying to capture something beyond her reach. She said again. Emiliano smiled, calm and patient, as if this moment were ordinary rather than earth-shattering. That's right. Like the beginning of my name. Valentina's eyes, which never met anyone's gaze, flickered toward him, just for a second. Just long enough to make sure he was listening. She repeated. Santiago's vision blurred. He gripped the doorframe to keep himself upright, overwhelmed by a single syllable that contained 7 years of silent prayers. Mariana appeared beside him, her hand finding his arm. "Still think this is about metrics?" she whispered. He could not answer, could barely breathe. His daughter had spoken, one syllable, one sound, but it was more than any specialist had achieved in 7 years of expensive interventions. "How?" he managed. Emiliano gave her something worth speaking for. Connection, understanding, patience. I could have given her those things. Could you? Can you give what you've never learned to receive? The question cut deep, because it illuminated a truth he had never faced. His entire life had been about achievement, about conquering, about forcing the world to bend to his will. He had never learned to simply receive, to accept, to let things unfold without his interference. In the room, Valentina had returned her attention to Emiliano. Their silent communication resumed, but something had shifted. The wall that had separated her from the world showed its first crack. Santiago watched his daughter, this stranger who shared his blood, but had always seemed to exist in a different dimension. And for the first time, he did not watch with expectation or demand or frustration. He watched with wonder. Later that evening, after Mariana and Emiliano had left for the night, Santiago sat in his home office, unable to focus on the reports that demanded his attention. His mind kept returning to that single syllable, M. Such a small sound to carry such enormous weight. His phone buzzed, a message from Victoria Castellanos, his late wife's sister, and the woman who had been circling his life with increasing intensity since Carolina's death. "Santiago, darling, dinner tomorrow. We need to discuss the foundation gala. I've taken the liberty of having a dress selected for your +1 appearance, 8 o'clock at Pujol. Don't be late." He stared at the message, feeling the familiar mix of obligation and unease that Victoria always provoked. She was beautiful, connected, everything society expected him to eventually claim as his second wife. She had made her intentions clear over the years, patience masked as family devotion. But lately, her interest had sharpened, particularly whenever Valentina's care arrangements were mentioned. He deleted the message without responding and pulled up a browser instead. He typed, "Mariana Torres, Neuropsychology, Mexico City." The search returned nothing relevant. He tried different combinations, different spellings, different credentials. Nothing. It was as if she had never existed professionally, which meant either she had lied about her background or someone had gone to great lengths to erase it. Santiago leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. A woman with no digital footprint, a son with an almost supernatural ability to connect with his unreachable daughter. Circumstances too convenient to be coincidental. He should investigate further, should demand answers, should protect himself and Valentina from whatever secrets Mariana carried. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was his daughter's lips forming that single syllable. All he could hear was the first word she had ever spoken. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would begin asking questions. Tonight, he would hold on to the miracle and pretend that hope did not terrify him more than despair ever had. The restaurant hummed with the particular frequency of wealth. Crystal clinked against crystal. Conversations flowed in cultivated murmurs, and the air itself seemed to carry the scent of influence. Santiago sat across from Victoria Castellanos, watching her arrange the napkin on her lap with the precision of someone who had been trained from birth in the art of elegant dining. "You seem distracted, darling," Victoria said, her smile perfect and practiced. "Business troubles, something like that. Perhaps I can help. You know Father's connections in the banking sector. A word from him could smooth over any difficulties." Santiago reached for his wine, using the motion to buy time. Victoria's father, Arturo Castellanos, had been circling Mendoza Industries for years, seeking an alliance that would extend far beyond family dinners. "The difficulties aren't financial," he said carefully. "Ah, Valentina then. Victoria's expression shifted into something approximating sympathy, though it never quite reached her eyes. "I've heard you've hired someone new, a nanny with a child of her own. Rather unconventional, don't you think?" "Where did you hear that?" "Oh, Santiago, darling, you know how quickly news travels in our circles. I simply want to ensure you're not being taken advantage of. These people can be quite clever when they spot vulnerability." "These people?" Victoria waved a manicured hand. "You know what I mean. Women of a certain background who see a wealthy widower and think they've found their ticket to a better life. Carolina would have been devastated to see some opportunist worming her way into your home. Carolina would have wanted Valentina to be cared for properly, and I agree completely. Which is why I've been researching residential programs, wonderful facilities in Switzerland, in the United States, places where Valentina would receive round-the-clock specialized care from actual professionals." Santiago's jaw tightened. "We've discussed this. Valentina is not going to an institution. Program, darling, not institution. There's a difference." Victoria leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I only want what's best for both of you. Don't you think it's time to consider your own future? Your own happiness? Carolina has been gone for 5 years. You've mourned appropriately. Society doesn't expect you to remain alone forever." "I'm not alone. I have my daughter, a daughter who may never be able to give you the family you deserve, the heir your company needs." Victoria reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "We've known each other since childhood, Santiago. Carolina was my sister. Who better to help you build the future she would have wanted for you?" Santiago withdrew his hand, reaching for his wine again. The conversation was following a familiar script, one Victoria had been rehearsing with increasing boldness over the past year. "Tell me about this nanny," Victoria continued, undeterred. "Mariana, isn't it? What do you actually know about her?" "She's excellent at her job." Valentina responds to her. "Respond? Santiago, your daughter doesn't respond to anyone. The specialists have been very clear about that." "The specialists were wrong." Victoria's composure flickered, just for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in 3 weeks, this woman and her son have achieved more with Valentina than 7 years of expensive therapy. That's impossible. Unless," Victoria's eyes narrowed, "unless she's using some kind of manipulation, medications perhaps, or conditioning techniques that appear to work but actually cause harm in the long term." "That's absurd." "Is it? Do you have credentials for this woman, references that can be verified? Have you conducted a proper background check?" Santiago hesitated, and Victoria pounced on his silence. "You haven't. Of course you haven't. You're so desperate for hope that you've let a stranger into your home without proper vetting." She shook her head, her expression shifting to wounded concern. "Santiago, I'm only trying to protect you. Let father's people look into her, just to be safe. I'll handle my own background checks. Will you? Or will you continue to let this woman cloud your judgment because she offers you false hope?" Victoria sighed, reaching for her own wine. "I've hired a private investigator. Don't look at me like that. Someone has to look out for your interests, since you're clearly not doing so yourself." Anger flared in Santiago's chest, but years of business negotiations had taught him to control his reactions. "Call off your investigator, Victoria. The report should be ready by end of week. Whatever we find, you'll thank me eventually." Santiago stood, placing his napkin on the table with deliberate calm. "This dinner is over. Santiago, don't be dramatic. I'll pay my respects to your father at the gala. Beyond that, I think it's best if we maintain distance." Victoria's perfect composure cracked fully now, her eyes flashing with something harder than concern. "Distance? After everything my family has done for you? After I waited patiently while you grieved? While you devoted yourself to that child who will never give you anything in return? Valentina is my daughter. Whatever she gives me is enough." He turned and walked away, leaving Victoria with her wine and her fury and her perfectly practiced smile that had finally shown its true edge. Outside, the night air carried the familiar sounds of Mexico City traffic. Santiago stood on the sidewalk, loosening his tie, breathing deeply. His phone buzzed. A message from Mariana. Something happened. Call when you can. He dialed immediately, his heart rate spiking. Mr. Mendoza. Mariana's voice was steady but urgent. Valentina had a breakthrough tonight. A significant one. What kind of breakthrough? She spoke. Not just syllables, words, two complete words. Santiago leaned against the restaurant's facade, legs suddenly unsteady. What words? She said, "Thank you," to Emiliano. He gave her one of his figurines and she looked at him and said, "Thank you." Clear as anything. The sounds of the city faded around him. Thank you. Two words that most parents hear countless times before their children can even walk. Words he had given up hope of ever hearing from his daughter's lips. "Mr. Mendoza, are you there?" "I'm here," he managed. "I'll be home in 20 minutes. He disconnected and stood motionless for a long moment, processing the collision of the evening's events. Victoria's veiled threats and barely concealed contempt, Valentina's impossible progress, the mystery of who Mariana Torres really was. When he arrived home, the penthouse was quiet, but for soft sounds drifting from Valentina's room. He found Mariana sitting in the hallway, her back against the wall, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. "She's sleeping," Mariana said softly. "The best sleep she's had since I've been here. No restlessness, no distress sounds, just peaceful sleep." Santiago slid down the wall to sit beside her, something he never would have done 3 weeks ago. "Tell me everything." Emiliano was showing her his figurine collection. He'd been saving his favorite one, a small dragon, telling her about it for days without ever pressuring her to respond. Tonight, he decided she was ready to have it. He placed it in her hands and said, "This is for you, because you're my friend." And she spoke. She looked at him first, really looked at him. Direct eye contact, which she'd never managed before. Then she said, "Thank you," just like that, as if she'd been saving the words and finally found someone worth spending them on. Santiago closed his eyes, overwhelmed. How is this possible? Every specialist said she might never develop verbal communication, that her brain simply wasn't wired for it. Maybe they were measuring the wrong thing. Mariana turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. Or maybe they were so focused on what Valentina couldn't do that they never stopped to see what she could. "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." "I've thought about nothing else for 10 years. The admission hung in the air, heavy with implication. Santiago opened his eyes, studying her profile in the dim hallway light. "Why 10 years specifically?" Mariana was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight he had not heard before. "Because 10 years ago I lost someone. A child I was working with, a boy who reminded me of Valentina in many ways, non-verbal, brilliant in ways no one recognized. He was making progress, real progress. And then she stopped, her hands tightening around her teacup. What happened? Someone decided I was getting too close, that my methods were unorthodox, that a professional should maintain appropriate distance." Her laugh was bitter. "They filed complaints, fabricated evidence. By the time the investigation cleared me, the boy had been moved to an institution. 6 months later, he stopped eating. 3 months after that, he was gone." Santiago felt the weight of her words settle over him. "That's why you left the field." "I didn't leave. I was pushed out. My license was suspended pending review, and by the time it was reinstated, my reputation was destroyed. No hospital would hire me. No clinic would take the risk. So you became a nanny. I became a mother." She looked at him then, and he saw the full depth of what she carried. "Emiliano needed me, and children like Valentina needed someone who would never, ever give up on them, even if I had to work as a cleaner or a cook or a nanny to be near them. The agency said you had experience with special needs children. They didn't mention you were a neuropsychologist. I didn't tell them. I couldn't risk another investigation, another accusation, another child being taken away because someone decided my methods were too unconventional." Santiago processed this revelation, fitting it against everything he had observed over the past weeks. Her knowledge, her patience, her ability to see Valentina in ways no hired caregiver ever had. Who filed the original complaint? He asked quietly. Mariana's expression hardened. Someone who had a lot to gain from discrediting me. Someone connected to the family of the child I was treating. They wanted him in an institution where they wouldn't have to deal with him. I was the obstacle. Do you know their name? I know their name, but it wouldn't mean anything to you. Something in her tone suggested otherwise. Santiago filed the detail away, adding it to the growing list of questions that surrounded this woman. Victoria Castellanos hired a private investigator to look into your background, he said. Mariana went very still. Your sister-in-law. You know who she is? I know of the Castellanos family. Everyone in certain circles does. She seems convinced you're some kind of opportunist trying to take advantage of my situation. And what do you think? Santiago considered the question carefully. 3 weeks ago, he would have agreed with Victoria without hesitation. Now, having watched Mariana work with Valentina, having witnessed Emiliano's gentle patience, having heard his daughter speak for the first time in her life, he found his certainties shifting. I think you're hiding something, he said finally, but I also think you're the only person who's ever truly seen my daughter. That paradox is going to keep me up at night. Mariana smiled slightly, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. Good. A little insomnia builds character. Is that your professional opinion? That's my opinion as someone who hasn't slept properly in 10 years. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of shared secrets creating an unexpected intimacy. From Valentina's room came the soft sounds of peaceful sleep. Thank you, Santiago said quietly. For what? For giving my daughter her voice. For giving me hope that I might actually know her someday. Mariana turned to look at him, and in the dim light he saw something shift in her eyes. A wall coming down, just slightly. An acknowledgement that whatever existed between them had become more complicated than employer and employee. Don't thank me yet, she said. We're just at the beginning. The hardest part is still ahead. What do you mean? I mean that the people who destroyed my career are still out there. And if what Victoria is doing leads them to me, to Emiliano, to Valentina, she shook her head. This isn't just about teaching your daughter to speak, Mr. Mendoza. It's about protecting her from people who see children like her as problems to be hidden away. Who are these people? That's the question, isn't it? Mariana stood, gathering her teacup. I should go. Emiliano is with the doorman, waiting. Santiago stood as well. I can have my driver take you home. We prefer the metro, less traceable. The word choice struck him. Traceable, as if she were constantly evading something. Someone. Mariana. He caught her arm gently as she turned to leave. Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone anymore. She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. For a moment he thought she might say something, reveal something. Trust him with whatever darkness she carried. Instead, she simply nodded. Good night, Mr. Mendoza. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. She walked away, and Santiago watched her go, feeling the weight of everything unspoken between them. Somewhere in the city, Victoria Castellanos was plotting. Somewhere, an investigator was digging into Mariana's past. Somewhere, secrets waited to be uncovered that would change everything. But in this moment, all Santiago could think about was his daughter sleeping peacefully for the first time in memory, 2 words echoing in the silence like a promise. Thank you. It was, he realized, the beginning of everything he had never known he needed. The investigator's report landed on Victoria Castellanos' desk at precisely 9 in the morning, delivered by a man whose forgettable face was his greatest professional asset. She dismissed him with a wave and opened the manila folder with the anticipation of someone unwrapping a long-awaited gift. What she found inside made her smile. Mariana Torres, born Mariana Elena Vega Torres, former neuropsychologist specializing in pediatric developmental disorders, licensed in 2012. License suspended in 2015 following allegations of professional misconduct and inappropriate attachment to a patient. The patient in question, Emiliano Vega, a 7-year-old boy with severe developmental delays who had been under state custody following the death of his biological mother. Victoria's smile widened as she read further. The boy had never been legally adopted. Mariana had been granted emergency guardianship during the investigation, and when the charges were eventually dismissed, she had simply disappeared with the child. No formal adoption proceedings, no legal documentation, just a woman and a boy who vanished into the margins of society. The implications were delicious. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she had memorized years ago. "Father, I have news about our Santiago problem. The nanny he's become so attached to. She's a kidnapper." Across the city, Santiago sat in his home office, staring at the email that had arrived overnight from his own security team. He had ordered the background check the night after dinner with Victoria, unwilling to wait for whatever twisted version she would present. The facts were largely the same as what Victoria had discovered, but his team had dug deeper, finding court documents and testimony that painted a different picture entirely. Mariana had not kidnapped Emiliano. She had saved him. The boy's biological mother had died of an overdose when he was 5. His father was unknown. The state had placed him in a group home where his special needs were ignored, where he had begun to deteriorate rapidly. Mariana, assigned as his therapist, had witnessed the neglect firsthand and filed multiple reports that went nowhere. When Emiliano stopped eating, when he began harming himself, when the facility refused to intervene, Mariana had taken matters into her own hands. She had used her professional credentials to secure emergency guardianship, and then, when the system threatened to return him to the same facility that had nearly killed him, she had vanished. The woman who had destroyed her career to save a child who was not hers. The woman who had lived in shadows for 10 years to protect a boy. The system had failed. The woman who was now teaching his daughter to speak. Santiago closed the email and sat in silence, processing the weight of what he had learned. His phone rang. Roberto, his assistant. "Sir, there's a Victoria Castellanos in the lobby. She's demanding to see you immediately. She has people with her, official-looking people." Santiago's blood ran cold. "Stall her. Tell her I'm in a meeting." "Sir, she's already in the elevator. Security couldn't stop her without creating a scene." He had perhaps 90 seconds before Victoria arrived with whatever devastation she had planned. Santiago moved quickly, sending a single text to Mariana. "Don't come today. Victoria knows. Stay hidden." The response came immediately. "Emiliano is already there. He went early to work on something with Valentina. I'm on my way." The elevator doors opened before Santiago could respond. Victoria swept into the penthouse flanked by 2 men in suits, their expressions professionally blank. "Santiago, darling." Victoria's smile was triumphant. "I believe you've met Detective Ramirez from Child Protective Services, and this is Mr. Ortega from the District Attorney's office." Santiago positioned himself between the newcomers and the hallway that led to Valentina's room. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning is quite simple." Victoria produced a folder from her designer bag. "The woman you've trusted with your vulnerable daughter is a fugitive. She kidnapped a child 10 years ago and has been evading authorities ever since. These gentlemen are here to ensure she faces justice and to evaluate whether Valentina has been harmed by her influence." "Mariana Torres is not here," Santiago said coldly. "Perhaps not, but the boy is, isn't he? Emiliano, the stolen child." Victoria's eyes glittered. "He'll need to be taken into custody while this matter is sorted out." Santiago felt something fundamental shift inside him. For years, he had navigated business conflicts with calculated precision, always maintaining control, always protecting his interests through strategy rather than emotion. But this was not business. This was his daughter. This was a woman who had given him hope. This was a child who had performed miracles. "You will not touch that boy," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made even the officials hesitate. "And you will not come into my home making accusations without proper warrants." Detective Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Mendoza, we're simply here to ask questions. Ms. Castellanos indicated there might be a child at risk. The only child at risk is my daughter, and the risk comes from people who want to institutionalize her rather than understand her. Santiago turned to Victoria. You've wanted Valentina out of the way since the moment Carolina died. Don't pretend this is about protecting children when it's really about removing obstacles to whatever future you've imagined for yourself. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. How dare you? I loved Carolina. I've only ever wanted what's best for her daughter. You've wanted Valentina in a facility where she'd be forgotten, where I'd be free to play the role of grieving widower turned society husband, where the Castellanos family could finally merge with Mendoza Industries through marriage rather than merit. That's absurd. Is it? Tell me, Victoria, how much did your father's banking consortium lose when I refused to give them preferential treatment last quarter? How much would they gain if you became Mrs. Mendoza and suddenly had influence over my decisions? The officials exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding around them. Mr. Mendoza, Mr. Ortega interjected, regardless of personal matters, there are serious allegations regarding this Mariana Torres. If she has indeed been living under false pretenses with an illegally obtained child, that requires investigation. Then investigate, properly, through legal channels. Not through ambush tactics orchestrated by a woman with obvious personal motivations. Santiago pulled out his phone. My legal team will be here within 20 minutes. Until then, no one enters any room in this penthouse, and no one speaks to any child without counsel present. Victoria's jaw tightened. You're protecting a criminal, Santiago. When this comes out, and it will come out, your reputation will be destroyed. Everything you've built will crumble. I've built an empire on taking calculated risks. This isn't a risk. This is recognizing that the only criminal in this room is the one who orchestrated a morning raid on a child's home. The elevator doors opened again, and Mariana stepped out. She had clearly run. Her hair was disheveled, her breathing rapid, her eyes wild with the particular terror of a mother who knows her child is in danger. But when she saw the scene before her, something changed in her posture. She straightened, lifted her chin and walked forward with the dignity of someone who had nothing to hide. I'm Mariana Torres, she said clearly. Whatever questions you have, you can ask me directly. Leave the children out of this. Victoria's smile returned, sharper now. How touching. The kidnapper presents herself. I never kidnapped anyone. Mariana's voice was steady, despite her obvious fear. Emiliano was dying in state custody. The facility was neglecting him. I filed reports. I begged supervisors. I did everything through proper channels, and no one listened. When he stopped eating, when he started hurting himself, I made a choice. I would rather spend my life running than watch another child die because the system failed him. A touching story, Victoria said. Unfortunately, the law doesn't make exceptions for vigilante justice. The law cleared me of all charges, Mariana countered. The investigation found no wrongdoing. My license was reinstated. But by then, the damage was done. No one would hire me, no one would trust me, and the same people who had neglected Emiliano were waiting to take him back. So you ran. I protected my son, just as I would protect any child in my care. Mariana's eyes met Santiago's briefly before returning to Victoria, including Valentina. Detective Ramirez stepped forward, his expression troubled. Ms. Torres, we'll need to verify your claims. If what you're saying is true, if the original charges were dismissed, then this may be a matter for family court rather than criminal investigation. It's not a matter for any court, Santiago interjected. It's a matter of a vindictive woman using official channels to pursue a personal vendetta. Santiago, please. Victoria's voice dripped with false concern. I understand you've developed feelings for this woman. It's natural. She's attractive. She's sympathetic. She's everything a lonely widower might fall for. But you cannot let that cloud your judgment about what's best for Valentina. What's best for Valentina is the woman who taught her to speak, the boy who became her first friend, the people who saw her as a person rather than a problem. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but a sound from the hallway stopped her. Footsteps, small, deliberate, approaching. Everyone turned to see Valentina standing at the end of the corridor, Emiliano beside her. She held his hand, something she had never voluntarily done with anyone. Her eyes, usually downcast, were fixed on the group of adults with an intensity that made even Victoria step back. "Val," Mariana breathed. "Sweetheart, go back to your room." But Valentina did not move. Instead, she opened her mouth and spoke. "No. Take M." 3 words, clear, defiant, protective. The room fell silent. Even Victoria seemed momentarily stunned by the sound of this child who supposedly could not communicate, expressing herself with perfect clarity. "No, take M," Valentina repeated, her grip on Emiliano's hand tightening. "M, mine, friend." Santiago felt tears threatening and did not care who saw. His daughter, who had never initiated communication, who had never expressed preference or attachment, was standing in her own home, defending the boy who had given her voice. Detective Ramirez cleared his throat. "I think perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere. It's clear this situation is more complicated than we were led to believe." "The situation is exactly what I told you," Victoria snapped, but her voice had lost its certainty. "The situation, Mr. Ortega said carefully, appears to involve a child who has made remarkable progress under Ms. Torres's care. That will certainly be relevant to any evaluation." Santiago moved to stand beside Mariana, presenting a united front. "My lawyers will be here momentarily. Until then, I suggest you wait in the lobby. And Victoria?" He met his sister-in-law's eyes with cold finality. "Don't ever come to my home again." Victoria's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the fury beneath. "You'll regret this, Santiago. When the truth comes out about who this woman really is, about her connection to our family, you'll wish you had listened to me." "The connection to your family?" Santiago frowned. "What are you talking about?" But Victoria had already turned, stalking toward the elevator with the officials reluctantly following. She paused at the doors, delivering her parting shot over her shoulder. "Ask her about the Castellanos Foundation. Ask her about the research program we funded. Ask her about the child who died." The elevator doors closed on her triumphant smile. Santiago turned to Mariana, whose face had gone pale. "What is she talking about?" Mariana's eyes were fixed on the elevator doors, haunted by something Santiago could not see. "The complaint that destroyed my career," she said quietly. "The people who orchestrated my downfall. It was never about the facility. It was never about Emiliano." She finally met his eyes, and the truth in them shattered something inside him. "It was the Castellanos Foundation. Victoria's father was on the board. The child who died in the institution, the one I couldn't save, he was their dirty secret. A Castellanos, heir born to the wrong woman, hidden away where no one would ever find him." The revelation hung in the air like poison. "They killed him," Mariana continued, her voice breaking. "Not directly, but they made sure he would never recover, never speak, never reveal who he really was. And when I got too close to the truth, they destroyed me." Santiago looked at his daughter, still holding Emiliano's hand, still standing defiantly in her own home. "Then we destroy them first," he said. The week that followed was the longest of Santiago's life. Lawyers swarmed the penthouse like well-dressed locusts. Depositions were scheduled and rescheduled, and Victoria's accusations hung over everything like a storm cloud refusing to break. But through it all, Valentina continued to speak. Not constantly, not fluently, but words came more frequently now, emerging like flowers through concrete. She spoke to Emiliano in their shared language of symbols and sounds. She spoke to Mariana in single words that carried the weight of complete sentences. She even spoke to Santiago, though rarely, and always in moments that left him emotionally devastated. "Papa," she had said one evening, looking at him directly for perhaps the 3rd time in her life, stay. He had stayed, had cancelled the business dinner that was supposed to be crucial, had sent his regrets to the investors who had flown in from Singapore, had done something he had never done in his entire career. He had chosen his daughter over his empire, and sitting on the floor of her room while she and Emiliano built elaborate structures from blocks, he had felt something unlock inside him, some rigid piece of his soul that had been frozen since Carolina's death, since the diagnosis, since the years of watching his daughter slip further away. Now, on a grey Thursday morning, he sat across from his legal team in his home office, reviewing the evidence they had compiled against the Castellanos family. "The Foundation's records are damning," his lead attorney Carmen Delgado explained. "They show a systematic pattern of covering up institutional failures. At least 3 children died in facilities they funded over a 15-year period. In each case, the families were paid substantial settlements in exchange for silence. And the child Mariana mentioned? The Castellanos heir?" Carmen's expression tightened. "That's where it gets complicated. We found birth records indicating that Arturo Castellanos had an illegitimate son by a woman named Elena Fuentes. The child was born with severe developmental disabilities and was immediately placed in institutional care. The mother died in a car accident when the child was 3. The accident was ruled suspicious but never properly investigated. They killed the mother and buried the child. We can't prove murder, but we can prove that the child named Miguel was transferred to a facility known for its poor conditions, specifically because no one would look for him there. And we can prove that when Mariana Torres began making progress with him, when he started showing signs of improvement that might eventually allow him to communicate, the Foundation filed complaints that resulted in her removal. Santiago absorbed this, feeling the full weight of the conspiracy that had shaped so many lives. Miguel, what happened to him? He died 8 months after Mariana was forced to stop treating him. The official cause was failure to thrive. Unofficially, the staff at the facility reported that he simply gave up, stopped eating, stopped responding, stopped fighting. The parallel to what had almost happened to Emiliano was not lost on Santiago. Mariana had saved one child from the same fate that claimed another. Can we connect Victoria directly to any of this? She was 19 when Miguel was born, old enough to know, old enough to be complicit in the cover-up. Her signature appears on several Foundation documents related to the institutional placement. Carmen paused. There's something else, something that might be more immediately useful. Tell me. Victoria Castellanos has been positioning herself to challenge your guardianship of Valentina. She's been building a case that you're an unfit parent, that your involvement with Mariana represents poor judgment, that Valentina would be better served by family care. Carmen's eyes met his. By her care, specifically. She's petitioned the court for emergency guardianship. The words hit Santiago like a physical blow. On what grounds? Endangering a minor by employing an unvetted caregiver with a criminal history. The fact that the charges against Mariana were dismissed doesn't matter for civil proceedings. Victoria only needs to create enough doubt to get a hearing. When is the hearing? Monday, which gives us 4 days to prepare a counter-argument. Santiago stood, walking to the window that had witnessed so many of his private struggles. 4 days to prevent his daughter from being taken by the same family that had murdered a child to protect their reputation. What do you need from me? Everything. Every document. Every communication. Every piece of evidence that demonstrates your fitness as a parent and Victoria's ulterior motives. But more importantly, we need Mariana's full testimony about what happened 10 years ago. The connection between her case and the Castellanos Foundation could be the key to discrediting Victoria entirely. Mariana won't testify. She's spent 10 years hiding to protect Emiliano. Coming forward publicly would expose him to the same system that failed him before. Then we need to find another way to protect him while she tells her story. Carmen gathered her files. Talk to her, Santiago. Make her understand that the only way to truly protect all of these children is to expose the people who have been hurting them. After the lawyers left, Santiago found Mariana in the kitchen, preparing lunch with the mechanical movements of someone whose mind was elsewhere. "You heard?" he asked. "I heard enough." She did not turn from the counter. "Victoria wants Valentina. She's using me to get her. She's not going to succeed. You don't know that. You don't know what these people are capable of." Now she turned, and he saw the exhaustion etched into her features. "I've watched them destroy everything I cared about. My career, my reputation, my belief that the system could protect the vulnerable. I can't watch them destroy your family too. Then help me stop them, by testifying, by putting Emiliano in the spotlight." She shook her head. "You don't understand. The moment I go public, they'll come for him. They'll claim I never had legal custody. They'll take him away and put him somewhere I can never reach him. I can protect him. You're powerful, Santiago, but you're not more powerful than a family that has spent generations buying judges and burying secrets. They'll find a way. They always find a way." Santiago crossed the kitchen, stopping just short of touching her. 10 years ago, you made an impossible choice. You sacrificed everything to save a child who wasn't yours. You've spent a decade running, hiding, living in fear. And through all of that, you never stopped fighting for children like Emiliano, children like Valentina, children like Miguel. Mariana's eyes glistened. "Miguel died because I couldn't save him. Miguel died because monsters in expensive suits decided his life was worth less than their reputation. You didn't fail him. They murdered him. And they've been getting away with it for decades because no one has been brave enough to stand up and tell the truth." "Brave?" Her laugh was bitter. "I'm not brave. I'm tired. I'm scared. I'm a woman who has been running so long she's forgotten what it feels like to stand still." "Then stand still with me." Santiago took her hands, holding them gently despite the urgency in his voice. "I know I'm asking you to trust someone you barely know. I know I'm asking you to risk everything you've protected for 10 years, but if we don't stop them now, they'll keep hurting children. They'll take Valentina and put her somewhere she'll disappear. They'll find Emiliano eventually and do the same to him. Running hasn't kept you safe, it's just delayed the inevitable." Mariana stared at their joined hands, tears finally falling. "If I testify and they take Emiliano anyway, I won't survive it. He's everything to me. He's the only reason I kept going when everything else fell apart. He won't be taken. I have resources Victoria can only dream of. I have legal teams and security and enough money to build walls around both of our children that no one can breach. But I need you to trust me. I need you to fight with me instead of running from them." For a long moment, she said nothing. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere in the penthouse, children's voices murmured in their private language. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why does this matter so much to you? A month ago, you didn't know I existed. You hired me to care for your daughter, not to become your partner in taking down one of the most powerful families in Mexico." Santiago released her hands and stepped back, giving her space while maintaining eye contact. "Because my daughter spoke. For the first time in 7 years, she opened her mouth and words came out, not because of expensive therapists or miracle treatments or anything money could buy, because a boy named Emiliano showed her that someone was listening, because a woman named Mariana saw her as a person instead of a problem." He paused, gathering words for feelings he had never articulated. "I've spent my entire life believing that success meant controlling everything, building walls, crushing competitors, never showing weakness. And where did that get me? A daughter I couldn't reach, a wife I couldn't save, an empire that meant nothing because I had no one to share it with. Santiago, you walked into my home and changed everything, not through strategy or manipulation, but through patience and kindness and the simple act of seeing people as they truly are. If I lose you, if I let them take you and Emiliano, I lose the first real hope I've had in years, and I'm not willing to do that, not without a fight." Mariana wiped her eyes, a small smile breaking through. "That's quite a speech for a man who claims to hate emotional conversations. I'm learning, slowly, painfully but learning. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders, in a gesture he had come to recognize as her preparing for battle. If I testify, I need guarantees. Real guarantees, not just promises. Name them. Emiliano gets formal adoption papers. Legal, unbreakable, making me his mother in every way the law recognizes. If something happens to me, he goes to someone I trust, not back into the system. Done. What else? Valentina's therapy continues, regardless of what happens in court. If Victoria somehow wins, if they take her, you don't stop fighting. You don't give up on her the way the system gave up on Miguel. I will never stop fighting for my daughter. That's not a guarantee. That's a promise from a father who finally understands what that word means. Mariana nodded slowly. Then I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. The cover-up, the foundation, Miguel, all of it. She met his eyes with fierce determination. But you should know something first, something I haven't told anyone. What is it? Miguel Castellanos, the boy who died. He wasn't just any illegitimate child. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He was Victoria's son. She gave birth at 17 and let her father hide the boy away. She's not just protecting her family's reputation. She's protecting her own secret. Her own abandonment, her own murder. The revelation hit Santiago like lightning. Victoria, perfect, polished Victoria, who had been positioning herself as the ideal replacement for his dead wife. Victoria, who had been advocating for Valentina's institutionalization. Victoria, who had abandoned her own disabled child and then let her family ensure he would never live to tell the tale. How do you know this? He asked. Miguel told me. Not in words. He couldn't speak, but he drew pictures, showed me photographs he'd somehow kept hidden, a woman with dark hair and light eyes. Victoria at 17, holding an infant with terror on her face. Mariana's expression hardened. I have the pictures. I kept them all these years, hoping someday I could use them to expose her. I just never had anyone powerful enough to stand with me. Santiago took her hands again. You do now. The sound of small feet interrupted them. Valentina appeared in the kitchen doorway, Emiliano behind her. Mama, Valentina said, pointing at Mariana. The word hung in the air. Santiago felt his heart stop. His daughter had never used that word before, had never had a mother figure she acknowledged. Mariana's tears returned, but she was smiling. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. Valentina walked to her and wrapped small arms around her waist. No go, Valentina said. Mama, no go. The courtroom was smaller than Santiago had expected. Wood-paneled walls absorbed sound, creating an atmosphere of hushed importance. Judge Elena Morales presided from the bench, her expression revealing nothing as she reviewed documents. Victoria Castellanos sat with her legal team at one table, her father Arturo, a looming presence behind her. She had dressed the part of concerned family member, soft colors and minimal jewelry, her expression arranged into careful worry. Santiago sat with Mariana and their attorneys at the opposite table. Behind them, in the gallery, his security team watched over Emiliano and Valentina, both of whom had insisted on being present despite Santiago's objections. This hearing will determine emergency guardianship of the minor child Valentina Mendoza, Judge Morales announced. Ms. Castellanos has petitioned based on claims of parental negligence and endangerment. Mr. Mendoza has counter-petitioned with allegations of harassment and ulterior motives. We will hear from both parties. Victoria's attorney, a silver-haired man with the smooth assurance of someone accustomed to winning, stood first. Your Honor, my client seeks only to protect her niece from a father who has demonstrated consistently poor judgment. Mr. Mendoza employed an individual with a documented history of child abduction charges to care for his extremely vulnerable daughter. The charges were dismissed, Carmen Delgado interjected. The charges were dismissed on technicalities. The fact remains that Ms. Torres took custody of a child without proper legal authorization and spent 10 years evading authorities. This is not the profile of someone who should be trusted with a special needs child. Judge Morales turned to Carmen. Counselor, your response? Carmen stood, radiating quiet confidence. Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Miss Torres is not only qualified, but essential to Valentina Mendoza's welfare. More importantly, we will show that Ms. Castellanos' petition is motivated not by concern for her niece, but by a desire to conceal criminal activities by the Castellanos family, specifically regarding the Castellanos Foundation and its systematic mistreatment of vulnerable children. Arturo Castellanos shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Victoria's expression flickered briefly before resettling into manufactured concern. "Those are serious allegations," Judge Morales observed. "We have serious evidence." The hearing proceeded through testimony and cross-examination. Santiago took the stand and described Valentina's progress under Mariana's care. He produced video evidence of his daughter speaking, something the specialists had claimed might never happen. Then Mariana testified. She spoke quietly but clearly, describing her career, her work with Miguel, the complaints that had been filed against her, and the investigation that had eventually cleared her name. She described the conditions at the facility where Miguel had been placed, the neglect she had witnessed, and her desperate attempts to intervene through proper channels. "I knew I was risking everything," she said. "My career, my freedom, my future. But I also knew that if I didn't act, Emiliano would die, just like Miguel had died. Just like other children had died in facilities funded by people who saw them as problems to be hidden rather than human beings to be helped." "And you believe the Castellanos Foundation was directly involved in these deaths?" Carmen asked. "I don't believe it. I know it. The foundation funded the institutions. They selected which children were placed where. They paid to make complaints disappear and families go silent." Mariana's gaze swept the courtroom, landing briefly on Victoria. "And when children began showing improvement, when they developed the ability to communicate, when they might have been able to tell someone what was happening to them, those children were transferred to facilities where improvement was impossible." Victoria's attorney jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is speculation and character assassination." "We have documentation," Carmen replied. "Bank records, internal memos, testimony from former facility employees. We request permission to enter these into evidence." Judge Morales reviewed the documents Carmen presented. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes widened slightly as she read. "These records indicate financial transfers from the Castellanos Foundation to multiple childcare facilities dating back 20 years. There are also what appear to be internal communications discussing specific children and their disposition." She looked up. "Mr. Castellanos, were you aware of these communications?" Arturo Castellanos rose, his bearing still commanding, despite the evidence mounting against him. "Your Honor, the Foundation has funded charitable work for decades. Any suggestion that we deliberately harm children is outrageous and defamatory." "Then you won't object to a full investigation," Judge Morales replied. "These documents will be referred to the appropriate authorities." Victoria stood suddenly, her composure finally cracking. "This is ridiculous. We're here about my niece, not about some fabricated conspiracy theory. My sister's child is being cared for by a woman who kidnapped a child. How is that not the relevant issue?" "Please sit down, Ms. Castellanos." "I will not sit down while my family is being slandered. Santiago, tell them I only want what's best for Valentina, what Carolina would have wanted." Santiago rose from his seat, meeting Victoria's eyes with cold certainty. "Carolina would have wanted our daughter to speak, to be seen, to be loved. You wanted her hidden away in an institution where she would be forgotten, just like you forgot Miguel." The name landed like a bomb. Victoria's face went white. "How dare you?" she whispered. "Miguel Castellanos, born to Victoria Castellanos when she was 17 years old, father unknown, placed in institutional care immediately after birth, died at age 12 in a facility funded by the Castellanos Foundation." Santiago's voice carried throughout the courtroom. "Your son, Victoria, The child you abandoned because he was inconvenient. The child whose existence you've spent 20 years hiding. That's a lie. We have photographs. We have medical records. We have DNA evidence if needed. Arturo Castellanos grabbed his daughter's arm. Victoria, sit down. Don't say another word. But Victoria was beyond strategy now, beyond the careful performance she had maintained for decades. You don't understand. He was damaged. He was wrong. He would have destroyed everything our family built. I did what I had to do. You killed your own child, Mariana said quietly. Not with your own hands. But you knew what would happen when you sent him to that facility. You knew they would make sure he never improved, never communicated, never revealed who he really was. He wasn't supposed to die, Victoria's voice cracked. He was just supposed to disappear, to stop existing as a problem. I didn't know they would... She stopped, realizing what she had admitted. Judge Morales spoke into the stunned silence. Ms. Castellanos, I strongly advise you to stop speaking and consult with your attorney. What you're describing may constitute criminal liability. But Victoria was beyond caring now. The mask she had worn for decades finally shattered. You think you're so righteous, she spat at Santiago. You and your perfect dead wife and your broken daughter. Carolina knew. She knew about Miguel. She was helping me make sure no one ever found out. Why do you think we were such close sisters? Santiago felt the words like a knife. Carolina knew. She helped falsify records, made sure the Foundation's involvement couldn't be traced. She was protecting me, protecting our family, right up until that convenient car accident. The courtroom erupted. Arturo Castellanos was shouting at his daughter to stop talking. Victoria's attorney was demanding a recess. Judge Morales was gaveling for order, but Santiago heard none of it. He was staring at Victoria, processing the revelation that his wife, the woman he had mourned for 5 years, had been complicit in covering up the abuse and murder of children. A small hand slipped into his. Valentina had somehow navigated through the chaos to reach him. She looked up at her father with those dark eyes that had always seemed to hold secrets and spoke. Papa, okay. He knelt to her level, wrapping her in his arms. Yes, sweetheart, we're okay. On his other side, Mariana stood with Emiliano. Their eyes met over the children's heads, and something passed between them. Understanding, solidarity, hope. Judge Morales finally restored order. This hearing is suspended pending criminal investigation into matters raised today. Ms. Castellanos, you are remanded into custody. Mr. Castellanos, you are instructed not to leave the jurisdiction. She turned to Santiago with something approaching sympathy. Mr. Mendoza, given the circumstances, your petition is granted. Full custody of Valentina remains with you. I recommend continued therapy with qualified professionals of your choosing. Thank you, Your Honor. As the courtroom emptied, Victoria was led away in handcuffs, her perfect composure finally and permanently destroyed. Arturo Castellanos followed his lawyers, his empire crumbling around him. Santiago gathered his family, for that was what they had become, and walked out into the afternoon sun. What happens now? Mariana asked. Now we go home. We let the lawyers handle Victoria and her father. We focus on what matters. And what matters? Santiago looked at Valentina, who was showing Emiliano something on her hand. Their silent communication as natural as breathing. He looked at Mariana, this woman who had lost everything and kept fighting anyway. Family matters. Love matters, giving these children the future they deserve. 6 months later, the penthouse had transformed completely. Not in decor, though Mariana had softened some of the harsh modern edges with warmth and color. The transformation was in atmosphere. In the sound of children laughing, in the smell of cooking that wasn't prepared by strangers. In the feeling of coming home to something real. Valentina's progress continued to astonish the specialists who had once written her off. She spoke in sentences now, short ones, but clear. She had friends at the specialized school Santiago had founded, other children who communicated in different ways, who were seen and heard and valued. Emiliano had officially become Emiliano Mendoza Torres, the adoption finalized 3 months after the trial. He had started high school, his extraordinary empathy channeled into working with younger special needs children. Victoria Castellanos was awaiting trial on charges that would likely keep her imprisoned for decades. The Castellanos Foundation had been dissolved, its assets seized, its victims finally receiving the acknowledgement and compensation they deserved. And on a warm evening in spring, Santiago stood on the terrace with Mariana, watching the sun set over the city they had conquered together. "I have something to ask you," he said. "You're going to propose." He laughed, startled. "How did you know?" "Emiliano told Valentina, and Valentina told me." She smiled at his expression. "They've been planning the wedding for weeks. Apparently Valentina wants to be the flower girl, and Emiliano insists on making a speech. And what do you want?" Mariana turned to face him, this man who had started as her employer and become her partner, her protector, her love. "I want to stop running," she said. "I want to build something real. I want to watch our children grow up together and know that we created a family from broken pieces and made it whole." Santiago pulled the ring from his pocket. "Then say yes." "I already did. About a month ago, when Valentina asked if I was going to marry her papa, and I told her I hoped so." He slid the ring onto her finger, laughing and crying at once. "You could have told me." And miss seeing the great Santiago Mendoza nervous about asking a simple question. Never. He kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere inside, their children were laughing, building worlds together from imagination and love. From the doorway, Valentina's voice drifted out. "Mama? Papa? Dinner?" 3 words. Simple, ordinary, miraculous. Santiago took Mariana's hand and led her inside, to the table where their family waited, to the life they had built from hope and patience, and the quiet miracle of being truly seen. The end was really just another beginning. The end.